Whether you want to lose fat, build muscle, or just be the sexiest version of yourself, learning how to properly track your food is a great tool to do all those things. So let's learn how to do it the right way once and for all. This video is going to be broken down into a couple of different sections, so feel free to skip around to the area where you need the most help. First things first, starting with your numbers, your calories and your macros that you're going to be tracking. Now, recently I made a video going through this calculator in depth, so if you haven't watched that, go ahead and go watch that first or after this, and I'm going to go ahead and just start filling it out. So for my weight, I currently weigh 215 pounds. I am 76 inches tall. My neck measurement is 15. And my waist measurement is 37.5. Now, for my activity factor, I'm gonna go ahead and choose 1.3 here since I haven't been super active since I have a fractured ankle right now. And if we look at the calculator here, it went ahead and gave me 2,643 calories for my maintenance calories, or the number of calories that I would need to maintain my current weight. Now, if you want to lose fat, go ahead and type in a deficit here, something like -15, or if you're trying to bulk, do something like +15. But for today's purposes, I'm gonna put 0 in there and we're just gonna look at maintenance calories. All right, now coming down to the macronutrient section here, whenever you're coming up with your macros or putting together your macronutrients, you always wanna start with protein. Protein is the most important macronutrient when it comes to building muscle and losing fat, which is why we want to start with protein. Now, for most people, I recommend anywhere between 0.8 grams to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. That's gonna be a good starting point for most people. But if you have a lot of body fat to lose, you might be better off basing that number off of your fat-free mass here, which you can find in the calculator, or you could go off your height in centimeters. So for me, that would be 193 here, 193 grams of protein. But for this example, I'm gonna go ahead and do 200 grams of protein, and that falls right within that range of 0.8 to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. Now, as far as carbs and fats go, if you're just getting started and your goals are to look better with your shirt off, you wanna lose a bit of fat, build a little bit of muscle. If those are your goals, it really doesn't matter how you distribute your carbs and fats. What's gonna matter most are your total daily calories and your total daily protein. If you hit those two numbers, the math will work itself out with the carbs and fats, but I'm just gonna go ahead and fill out some numbers here that will fulfill these maintenance calories so the rest of the calculator fills out properly here. All right, and there we have our numbers. So our calories that we're looking at here are 2,643 calories, 200 grams of protein, 235 grams of carbs, and 100 grams of fat. But we're not too worried about the carbs and fats. Now, what you need to understand is that these numbers, whether you get the numbers from this calculator or another calculator, they're just a starting point. And you'll probably have to make some adjustments down the road, and that's fine. But that being said, if you decide to track, it's really important in this initial phase here that you are as consistent and accurate as you can be so we can start to see if these numbers are gonna work for you or if we need to make those adjustments. All right, now that we have our numbers, next it's time to plan out your meals. Planning out your meals before it's time to eat, whether that's planning out for the entire week ahead or just planning out your day in ahead, is a much better strategy to help you reach your goals than just tracking food as you go throughout the day. When you're hungry and you're ready to just sit down and eat, the last thing you want to do is track, and so you probably won't do it. And when you plan ahead for the week or even just the day, you already know what you're going to go eat, and so you don't have to think about it, and all you have to do is just follow the plan that you've already laid out for yourself. So planning out, whether it just be the day or the week, is the best way to ensure that you actually hit your numbers and have the necessary food to help you hit those numbers best. So to help you take those total daily numbers and break those numbers down into a per meal basis, all you're gonna do is take the total daily calories and the total daily macronutrients and divide that by the number of meals that you plan to eat that day. So you can either do that on your own, or it's also provided here in the calculator as well. Now, it doesn't really matter how many meals you eat. It's really gonna come down just to personal preference. That being said, I think for most people, anywhere between 3 and 6 meals is gonna make the most sense. I personally like 4. Okay, so you've decided to plan out your meals. You know how many calories and macros you're gonna need per meal. Now it's time to come up with some different meal ideas and start plugging that into your app of choice. Now, when coming up with these meals that you're planning to eat, you wanna always start with protein. And you wanna ask yourself, what's the main source of protein for this meal gonna be? And then start to build the meal around that. The next thing I think about when planning out my meals is what fruit or vegetable I'm gonna have with the meal. And then lastly, what type of carb I'm gonna have for that meal. Okay, so then the last thing that we're gonna do is after we've come up with some meals that we're gonna eat, we're gonna start entering that into our app of choice, something like MyFitnessPal, or what I use is Chronometer for myself and for my coaching clients, and start inputting the foods that you plan to eat and start tweaking them to fit those numbers on your per meal basis. So it'll look something like this. All right, so now we're getting into the nitty gritty of it and actually starting to track some food. When it comes to tracking food, there's a couple of best practices that you're gonna wanna follow. The first is to use something like an app, something like Chronometer or MyFitnessPal. And the second thing is to use a food scale as often as possible to ensure that you're getting the most accurate results. Now, when you're picking out a food scale, you wanna pick one that you can like zero it out and use it negative, which I'll go ahead and show you here in a minute. And then also you want one with like a removable reader. So if you put a big plate or a big bowl on there, you can actually pull it out and still read, how many grams it weighs. And then the last thing is weigh everything in grams. Trust me, it's gonna make things a whole lot easier instead of trying to go back and forth between ounces and grams and whatever other kind of units there are to measure. But yeah, just weigh everything in grams. It's gonna be easier. Now, when it comes to tracking your food, there's gonna be a couple different scenarios that you're gonna run into. The first is just, scanning something like a barcode. Now, this one's the easiest one to deal with. All you have to do is scan the barcode and it should come up in your app of choice. But I still recommend that you weigh out the food after you've scanned it on the barcode, unless you plan on eating the entire serving size or container. I don't know why I did that. So this is great for obviously anything that has a barcode. The next scenario that you will eventually run into when tracking your macros is weighing out meat and whether you should weigh it out raw or cooked. Now, ideally, it's best to weigh meat before it's cooked, so when it's raw. And the reason being is that these databases are typically based off of raw food. But also when you cook food, when you cook meat, like let's say you cook a chicken breast or a steak, what happens is it loses moisture and it dries up. And so it's gonna weigh less. I have a pack of chicken that we're gonna put in the air fryer. We're gonna weigh it raw, weigh it cooked, and see the difference. But so weighed 589 raw, 353 cooked. So it lost about 40% of its weight. So when you're measuring your meat when it's cooked, you're actually getting more than what the scale says. And that being said, entering in your meat when it's cooked is typically a lot easier. So if that's something that you're gonna be able to do more consistently, that's fine. Just whichever method you choose, weighing it raw or cooked, just be consistent with it. Another scenario that you're gonna run into inevitably when you're tracking macros is food or condiments in a jar or something like that. And I didn't learn this for the longest time, and I really wish I would have learned this sooner. So here's a quick little hack to weigh anything that's in a jar or a container. So it could be like peanut butter, jam, mayonnaise, barbecue sauce. I mean, you could even pull your chicken out of a container this way too. So what you want to do is you're going to put the item on the scale. You're going to zero out that scale so it says 0, and then take out however much you plan to use, whether that's peanut butter, chicken, mayonnaise, whatever, and then put the container back on the scale, and whatever that number reads there, it's going to be a negative number, but that's how much you used, and that's what you'll enter into your app. Now, another scenario that you'll run into are foods without labels. So things like fruits and vegetables, meat would fall under this as well. And what you do here is you just look up whatever it is and then weigh it. Now, when it comes to fruit and vegetables, let's take a look at like strawberries, for example. Driscoll's strawberries is the first thing that comes to mind, or a Dole banana. You don't need to type in Dole banana. A banana is a banana. It's gonna have the same macronutrients, and that's really not gonna matter anyways. So go ahead and just type in banana, strawberry, whatever the fruit or vegetable is, and throw it on your food scale, enter it into the app, you're good to go. Now, another scenario that you will inevitably run into on your journey in tracking macros to either lose fat, build muscle, or just be the sexiest version of yourself is eating out at restaurants. Now, I kind of put this into two different categories. A chain restaurant, something like a In-N-Out, a Chick-fil-A, a Chipotle, that kind of thing. And then the other category is like a mom and pop restaurant, or I guess not a chain. Now, one thing that I really like about Chronometer, and is another reason that I encourage you to use Chronometer over some of the other apps, is that it has a lot of awesome options for common restaurants. Again, for example, like big chains like In-N-Out. God, In-N-Out sounds so good right now. Chick-fil-A, Chipotle, all that kind of stuff. So you can just go over to the restaurants tab and start typing stuff in, whether that be a restaurant name or a specific item on the menu there, and it'll start to pop up. And there's tons of different options here. So that can be super helpful as well. Now, for the more mom and pop type restaurants, you can try and estimate how many calories are going to be in there. That might look like 200 grams of steak. That might be 200 grams of mashed potatoes. But at the end of the day, your guess is going to be just that, a guess. And what you need to understand is is that it's just gonna be a bit harder to reach your goals, especially if your goals are fat loss, if you're eating out all the time. So I would just try not to make that a habit, especially if you're serious about your fat loss goals. But at the end of the day, just remember that when we go out to eat, even if it's something like In-N-Out or Chick-fil-A where we can find that stuff to track on there, you don't have nearly as much control as you would cooking your meals at home. And so just take whatever the app says with a grain of salt if you're trying to track that stuff. And the last thing I want to talk about here is that tracking macros was never meant to be a long-term solution. It's an amazing tool to help you reach a specific goal for a specific amount of time and help you learn a lot about nutrition. But that doesn't mean that you need to become a macro tracking robot and track every meal every day for the rest of your life. Use it in specific scenarios to reach specific goals, but if you've never tracked macros in your life, I think you should give it a try. I think you should try to be as consistent and as accurate and as disciplined at least 2 weeks, but maybe give it like a month or something. But just give it some sort of shot and you're gonna learn a lot in the process. It's a great way to build perspective around the foods that you eat and teaches you a lot about nutrition in a short amount of time. And it can be pretty eye-opening as well. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, go ahead and hit that like button and consider subscribing if you haven't already. And if you want personalized coaching to help you reach your goals in the safest, quickest, and healthiest manner possible, go ahead, hit the link down in the description there to apply for coaching. But other than that, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.